Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in. Now, you're MDiv students. You have officially survived the absolute crucible of first and second year Greek. You know your paradigms, you can probably parse an aorist passive participle in your sleep at this point, and you've wrestled with those incredibly complex syntax trees. But I want to invite you on a bit of an adventure today. We're going to step out of the sterile grammar lab and step into the living, breathing Greek New Testament. We're going to look far beyond basic sentence-level grammar and really discover how the biblical authors crafted these dynamic, cinematic texts that were literally designed to move their readers.
But first, let me ask you an honest question. Are you suffering from what we might call atomistic fatigue? I know the feeling, both pastorally and academically. You sit down with your Greek text and you're just exhausted. You're staring at flashcards, you're dissecting individual verbs, and you're essentially treating the inspired text like a box of isolated grammatical puzzle pieces. It feels like you're staring at the bark of a single tree through a microscope, completely missing the absolute majesty of the forest around you. Listen, if your translation work feels mechanical and lifeless right now, you are not alone.
And this perfectly illustrates a major paradigm shift we need to make. We almost always start with the atomistic view. That's that claustrophobic, street-level parsing of individual words and isolated clauses. And hey, it's totally necessary for beginners. But if you stay there, you completely miss the big picture. When you finally step back, you discover the discourse view. This is the sweeping, aerial vista. It's the understanding of how entire paragraphs, sections, and whole books convey profound theological meaning through these structured macro-level patterns. It's literally the difference between studying a single isolated brick and standing back to admire a soaring cathedral.
So what exactly is the tool that gets us up to that aerial vista? It's discourse analysis, which is sometimes called text linguistics. Basically, it's the branch of linguistics that examines language above the level of the sentence. It studies how whole texts actually function within their specific contexts to achieve communicative goals. You see, meaning in language doesn't just pop out of isolated words. It emerges from relationships, the relationships between clauses, and the relationships between the author and the audience. Discourse analysis gives us the true power of explanation. It tells us not just what an author wrote, but exactly why they made the specific linguistic choices they did to guide our mental models.
To really grasp this, we need the architectural blueprint of a text. Enter M.A.K. Holliday's Systemic Functional Linguistics, or SFL for short. Holliday argues that whenever we use language, we're actually doing three things simultaneously. First, there's the ideational metafunction. This is simply the what of the text, the participants, the actions, the circumstances. Second, the interpersonal metafunction. This is the relationship between the author and the audience. How is the author engaging you? And third, the textual metafunction. How is the message actually structured and glued together? Grasping these three distinct columns gives you a sort of X-ray vision to see exactly how the Greek text is built.
Okay, so how do we actually apply this?
Well, Cynthia Long Westfall has taken Holliday's massive linguistic theory and forged it into an incredibly practical exegetes toolkit specifically for the Greek New Testament. She gives us a 5-step inductive procedure. First, we group discourse units above the sentence level. Then, we identify the topics. Next, we analyze prominence, meaning what is the author literally shouting about? Then we interpret these units in their surrounding context. And finally, we construct a mental representation of the whole text. Guys, this isn't just dusty academic theory. This is how you actually trace an apostle's argument. And out of Westfall's work comes one of my absolute favorite concepts, zones of turbulence. Think of this in cinematic terms. You're coasting along in the text, and suddenly the established pattern of character reference or grammatical mood or verbal aspect just violently shifts. It's like a sudden shaky cam effect in an action movie. These marked disruptions are the text's way of screaming at you. Pay attention. Something exegetically and theologically huge is happening right here. If you're stuck in atomistic parsing, I promise you, you will completely miss the turbulence. The absolutely crucial point here is that language above the sentence level follows discoverable patterns that constrain and guide interpretation. An author's choice to use a specific verbal form or a connective particle is never, ever random. It's a highly deliberate flow control mechanism. The biblical authors, under the inspiration of the Spirit, were master craftsmen. They used these exact patterns to guide you right along the primary route of their argument or their narrative. Now, if you learned way back when that the aorist tense is simply past action or the perfect is past action with present results, we seriously need to upgrade your software today. Verbal aspect is not primarily about time. It is the author's chosen spatial viewpoint. Think of the biblical authors as film directors, and the tense forms are their camera lenses. They use aspect to subjectively position you, the reader, in relation to the action on the screen. Let's look at the very first camera lens, perfective aspect, which is primarily our aorist tense form. This is the helicopter view. Imagine you're flying 1,000 feet up above a downtown parade. You aren't seeing the individual floats moving on the street. You're seeing the entire parade from beginning to end as a single complete whole. It's an external, remote viewpoint. So when Mark or Paul uses an aorist, they are literally putting you in that helicopter to see the boundaries of an event from high above. But what happens when the author decides to swap the lens? We get the imperfective aspect, the present or imperfect tense forms. This is the street-level view. The author has suddenly dropped the camera out of the helicopter and placed you right down on the sidewalk. You are now internal to the action. It's highly proximate. You're watching the parade floats roll right past you in real time, unfolding before your very eyes. You can instantly feel the immediacy of the text.
These spatial adjustments reveal how the Greek tense forms act as literal distance controls between you and the textual event. Step 1. The present and perfect tense forms encode proximity. They pull you in close to the action. Step 2. The aorist, imperfect, and pluperfect tense forms encode remoteness. They push you further away to give you an entirely different vantage point. It's entirely about spatial adjustment, and it's brilliantly guiding your mental model of the text.
Let's get even more specific with this. Take the perfect tense form. Under this spatial model, the perfect tense is the ultimate macro lens. It grammaticalizes heightened proximity. It is zooming in. You aren't just on the street corner watching the parade anymore. You've stepped off the curb and you are standing inches away from the marching band. It intensifies that internal viewpoint to create a massive focal point in the text. By contrast, we have the pluperfect tense form. This is the author zooming out. It grammaticalizes heightened remoteness. If the perfect tense is stepping right into the middle of the parade, the pluperfect is taking a big step backward, away from the parade to attenuate that internal viewpoint. It pulls the camera far, far back. When you realize the biblical authors are constantly swapping these lenses to push and pull your attention, reading Greek becomes absolutely thrilling. Now just watch what happens when we apply these lenses across different biblical genres. In narrative texts, like the Gospels, the primary camera setup uses the aorist, that helicopter view, as the main line to move the core story forward. Meanwhile, imperfect forms are used for offline background details. But in non-narrative texts, like Paul's epistles, the entire setup flips. The mainline argument advances primarily through the imperfective, present and perfect tense forms. Paul wants you down on the street level, actively wrestling with the unfolding logic of his theology.
So why does all of this matter for you as an MDiv student? Because investing in discourse analysis transforms exegesis from mechanical, soul-sucking parsing into a dynamic encounter with how the biblical authors crafted texts that still speak so powerfully today. Listen, we don't learn Greek just to pass a parsing exam. We learn it to deeply, faithfully shepherd God's people. By understanding these text-linguistic lenses, you encounter divine truth exactly as the Spirit-inspired authors intended to present it. You gain the true power of explanation. Which brings us to a final provocative question, and really it's a challenge for you today. Are you going to stay stuck dissecting isolated words on the street, trapped forever in atomistic fatigue? Or are you ready to use the tools of discourse analysis to take flight over the living text? The New Testament is a masterful, purposeful, fully unified discourse just waiting to be explored. Apply these cinematic lenses to your very next Greek reading assignment and watch the text completely come to life. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring and keep digging deep into the living text.